Welcome to Ruth Kozak's book launch for Dragons in the Sky with Silver Bow Publishing. My name is Megan Hakkinen. I am the author of two adventure cycling memoirs, a two-time world ultra-distance cycling champion, and I coordinate some of the Federation of BC Writers programming. So I'd like to start this event by introducing Candace James, the general manager of Silver Bow Publishing. Candace is a poet laureate Amaretta for the City of New Westminster, as well as an acclaimed visual artist, musician, singer, songwriter, reviewer, and workshop presenter. Candace will speak just for a minute or two about Silver Bow Publishing and her experience working with Ruth on this project. Welcome, Candace.
Nice to be here. I am very, very happy to be the publisher of Ruth's book, Dragons in the Sky. It's a tremendously interesting story. And I'm ashamed to say I don't read a lot of books because I'm usually too busy working. But when I started reading Ruth's, I couldn't put it down. It just keeps you mesmerized throughout. You're wondering, oh, what's going to happen next? So I really think anybody purchasing this book is going to be very happy indeed. Ruth, of course, is just a gem to work with, as she is in real life. I hope you're going to enjoy the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks so much for kicking us off, Candace. So next, I'm just going to welcome Ruth. We're really excited to have you here, Ruth. I'll start by just welcoming you and saying how thrilled I am to be here for this event. Ruth Kozak is a Canadian novelist, travel journalist, poet, and playwright. Her historical fiction novel, Shadow of the Lion, Blood on the Moon, and Shadow of the Lion, The Field of Hades, about the fall of Alexander the Great's dynasty were published in 2015 and 2017 by Media Area CDM UK. Her book of poetry written while in Greece, Songs for Erato, was published in 2020. She lived for several years in Greece as well as the UK to explore most of the archaeological sites in her stories. Ruth also wrote a play titled The Street about the heroin addiction problem in Vancouver, and it was produced in 2000 by Theatre in the Raw. Ruth is currently working on a new novel, The Black Dove. Today, Ruth will read from her new release, Dragons in the Sky by Silver Bow Publishing. It's available as an ebook or print version from Silver Bow. You can find it, so you can purchase the books around the world from your local bookstore. You just have to ask your book retailer to order it in from Ingram Spark Distribution iPage catalog, and be sure to ask for Dragons in the Sky by Ruth Kozak. So welcome, Ruth. I will pass it over to you now. We're so excited to be here today to celebrate with you.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate this, and I thank you, Megan, and especially Candace very much for arranging this online Zoom launch. I'll hopefully be doing an in-person one in the new year, but this is wonderful to be able to do this one because I have seen people on here that have come on that live in other parts of the world. So this is wonderful that you've taken the time and effort to log in today. I really appreciate that. My writing career started when I was about 12. I started writing historical fictions when I was 12. First about First Nations, and then I got really interested in the Romans. When I was 16, I got introduced to Alexander the Great, and I wrote my first novel about him when I was 17. And during the years that I was married, I wasn't doing much writing or anything, but then eventually I had this idea for Dragons in the Sky. What happened was in 1979, I was making my first trip to Greece, going by bus from London to Athens. And before I went, I had been visiting my relatives in Wales. And coming back from Wales, the bus stopped in Salisbury, and I had a 4-hour wait there. And I saw a notice on the wall that said there was an Iron Age hill fort 4 kilometers out of town. So I decided, well, I've got time. I think I'll walk out there. So I started walking out toward the hill fort, Old Sarum. And as I got close to it, I could hear this voice talking to me, this girl telling me her story. It was amazing. And I wrote things down. I wrote everything that I remembered her telling me. I wrote it all down. And then I was on my way to Greece in 79, and I went to Athens. I was still making notes about this experience that I had. And later on, when I went to live in Greece in 83, I started to write dragons. But then I got interrupted because when I went back to Canada in 89 and 90, I really wanted to write the story about Alexander. So that's when I set Dragons in the Sky aside to write Shadow of the Lion, which took me quite a few years to write and research. When you're doing historical writing like this, you spend a lot of time just doing the research for the backup on the story. And I'd like to get everything as correct as I can. So anyway, then Shadow was finally published in 2015. First, they did it, it was a long book, so they did it in 2 volumes. First one in 2015, second one in 2017. And then I knew I had to get back to writing dragons again. So I started working on it again. And here we are. It's finally finished and it's finally published. And I really appreciate Silver Bow Publishing and Candace for taking it on, because these days it's pretty tough. I spent 2 years marketing it, and all I was getting was these places that wanted me to pay $7,000 or £3,500 to publish, and I will not pay to publish because my first books were traditionally published. So I was really grateful to Candace and Silver Bow Publishing. Now, I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from the story. This is a story that is told in the first person. It's almost like a past life regression. And when I was reading the whole script through a couple of times before Candace published it, I realized this is really almost like a past life regression. Because the experiences, many of the experiences that the protagonist in the story, Olwen, has, I've experienced myself in many ways. So it was interesting in that respect to look at it as if it's a past life regression. And I'm going to just read the very beginning here, so you'll see. And I've been having some visual problems, so I hope that my eyesight is going to be good. Anyway, this is the big Dragons in the Sky. The Druids believe that when we die, our souls return again in another form. Was it the sound of the wind or the bird song from the meadow that brought Olwen's voice to me that day as I sat on the edge of the earth mound at Old Sarum on the Salisbury Plain in England? I looked through her eyes and saw life as it was then. She spoke to me, telling me her story. This is how it starts. Part 1, Child of the Raven. Prologue. How do I tell my story? I'm Olwen, daughter of the Raven clan, child of the Druid. I'm a remembrancer, a seeress, and a healer. I know how to read the runes and the secret language of the heavens. At night, I study the patterns of the stars. My grandfather was a Druid, an elder priest of our tribe. He knew the mysteries of the heavens and the secrets of the forest, and he taught me these things. We're the Kimri. We live on the southern plain of Albion, where the borders of our tribe enclose the great stone circle, and the hill fort of Cairgwyn guarded the passage of the chalk trail. Now only a mound of earth rises out of the grassy fields like an inverted bowl. But when I was a child, there was a greenwood and beech groves where I collected roots and herbs, and an oak grove where the Druids worshipped at a secret shrine. The Druids are the oak seers, and they know all the mysteries. My people, the Asiltir, left the green hills of our homeland, Kimri, to settle here on the plain. Our village, Cairgwyn, was enclosed within a circular palisade of staves. It was a small village with wattled huts like rounded straw stacks with low roof thatches. Inside the stockade, an outer circle of stables and cattle sheds ringed the craftsmen's huts, then the houses of the freemen. In the center of the world, like a hub of a wheel, stood the timbered lodge of my grandfather, the elder priest. Outside the palisade, the fields were bright with wildflowers. Our yeomen herded cattle that grazed in the lush green pastures along the muddy river bank and raised small crops of barley and wheat. These were protected by the warriors of the Rykon's royal war band, who kept our borders safe from the raiders of rival tribes. The Rykon Mata ruled our tribe the same as a king. In those days, Caragwin's timbered halls rang with the bard's songs, and in the hidden grove, the oak seers prophesied fortune, war, and death. Now the council hall and the Rykon's lodge have decayed into earth. The mound is bare except for small shrubs and wild grasses. The oak grove that once held the mysteries of the gods has been burned and plowed into the soil. Here in the summer afternoon with the green gold countryside, whose air has the scent of fallow earth and meadow grass, one can still hear the gods speak. Who knows the secret of the oak groves? The spirits of priests and kings are here. Listen to my story. I'll tell it as the bards tell theirs. Listen to me. I'm Olwen, daughter of the Raven clan, child of the Druid. I'm an honored child. Olwen's clan is one of the Welsh clans, and my father was from Wales, so I really relate to the Welsh people. So that's that's the prologue. And how I've written it almost like a ballad with the stories being told as ballads. So this is the first ballad, Ballad 1, Olwen's song. They say I'm the fairest among flowers, daughter of the hawthorn, child of the raven, the druid's child. Listen to my song. I'm an honored child. I'm Olwen. My voice is the bird's song. My music is the wind's harp. I will be the pine cone clinging to the branch. The wind will not dislodge me. I will be the coral on the sea reef. The waves will not displace me. I will be the stone dolmen of the sacred henge. Neither time nor elements will disturb me. I will be the willow bending in the wind. I will be the wave uncurling on the sea. I will be the mountain, my pinnacle crowned with sun. Steadfast I will stand. So all the way through, I've used this sort of bardic kind of thing with the chapters, and the story starts in the Salisbury Plain, and then due to the circumstances that happen when she gets kidnapped, it ends up that they end up in Greece, which is my second home. And it's very interesting, the change, the way that her life changes and how she has to adapt to this new situation when she gets there. And I'll explain a little bit later exactly what happens when she gets there and how she ends up eventually at the end of the book getting herself back home again. And by the way, Stonehenge has, in the first part of the story and in the last part of the story, Stonehenge is another one of the sites there because it was a very important place for these people. And I'm going to read just a little bit of the Ballad 3. Each chapter is called a ballad rather than a chapter. And this one's called The Dragon Fire. And I either start with a bardic verse or I'll start with a piece like this. The god speaks and says, I'm the star sun, the golden dragon, the fire drake, the sky serpent. I foretell the births and deaths of great kings. Seek your portents in the heavens. Stanza 1. I always felt safe there in the bosom of the forest where only the wild creatures know the way through the honeycomb of trails. The trees are hung with shadows and the dappled hearts graze among the ferns. There are no secret coverts where the wood nymphs trail. Rabbits frolic in the sweet briar, and the red squirrels chatter from the pine branches. If you're very still, you'll hear the evening song of the thrush and the sweet and sad treble of the wood sprite. I followed the deer-trod path until it came to the rocky spur of the ridge below the hill fort. The bracken was as tall as my shoulders, and the tangle of blackberry bushes scratched my arms and legs as I pushed through I knew my way as easily as if I were a pied deer. Up on the ridge, where the hill fort is hidden by a stand of junipers, there was a little cave, snug as a rabbit's warren, cozy and sheltered, and known only to me. I often hid there, safe as a vixen in her lair. It was below the ramparts of the fort, and I could hear the muffled voices of the guards, and far away the village sounds, shouts of freemen, and barking dogs. I hid there all that day, while the Beltane's fires smoldered in the pasture, and the last dregs of mead were poured in the field to the field spirits. The sky faded to gray, then darkened as the moon came up. She was a golden moon with a serene face, like a reflection in a bronze mirror. I watched as the sky filled with stars. I knew them by name. There was Arianrod, spinning at her silver wheel. Alfida, the hub star, bright as a beacon in the jet dark sky. And the others, the hunter, the twins, and the great bear. They were old friends who remembered me. I made a supplication to Latona the moon. Is she not the sun god's mother? She who rules the night? What are the stars? Are they the myriads of souls who dwell in the back of the north wind? Is the bright star Alfida their guardian? The Druid says the stars are the messengers of the gods. Look for your portents in the stars. It was then that I saw what at first seemed to be a firebrand, a fiery arrow shooting from a bow. It arched across the eastern horizon, a pulsating, glowing ball with a tail that sparked and undulated, twining like a golden serpent across the heavens. For a moment it hung as though it were suspended, then suddenly it was swallowed in the black abyss. Who is the sun who twines himself around the universe like a golden serpent? Who is the dragon who breathes fire across the sky? The god says, I'm the star sun, the golden dragon, the fire drake, the sky serpent. I foretell the births and deaths of great kings. Seek your destiny in the heavens. I clambered out of my hiding place, my heart pounding with excitement. What I had seen was a portent of rare beauty, seldom observed by anyone but the sky seers. The sight of it so awed me that I forgot the chaos of the Beltane rites and the terror of the bull slaughter. A calm serenity enveloped me as though the goddess herself had wrapped herself arms around me, and I fell into a peaceful sleep on my bed of moss and boughs. Early in the morning, when the sky was rosy with the dawn's light, I came out of my hiding place and climbed down the embankment into the glade. There was a small ring of stones set in the clearing, 12 granite uprights, and an altar stone honoring Latona the moon. It was a sanctuary of the moon maidens, where the moon maidens held their spring solstice rites. I picked some sprigs of vervain and laid them on the altar. The glade was quiet except for the trilling of the birds. The bluish stones of the circle winked as the shafts of sunlight glanced off the dew-wet surface. A starling flapped by me from the alders, so close I could feel it stir the air by my head, and I saw the glint of iridescent green in its dark feathers. It perched on the headstone, then flew away into the trees. It was quiet in the glade. The wind strummed through the elder boughs, and I thought I could hear a harp-sweet melody and the wood-note treble of pipes. I listened to hear the bard's voice, but heard only the wind and the birds, and my heart beating like a small timbrel. I moved around the perimeter of the stones. As I crossed the shadow of the upright, the sunlight caught my movements, weaving a web of shadow and light. I began to whirl dizzily as though in a dream trance, my body empty as a shell, my spirit drawn out of me, so that it seemed I had become a vapor. Everything that had happened in the past was as distant as a dream. Then as suddenly as I heard it, the music vanished, as though it had come and gone in the wind. Except for the gossiping of the starlings, the grove was silent. I stood before the altar stone and repeated the incantations. The young spring leaves in the greenwoods shuddered in the gust of wind. A raven's sharp cry startled the flock of starlings scattering them, even made a swoop above the stone circle, then flapped away. When I looked to see where it had flown, I saw a man. He was at the edge of the clearing with the slanting sunbeams shining on him. As he began to walk toward me, something shot through me like a firebrand. Who is he who stands bathed in the sun's gold? Is he the god of the morning star? He came close to the circle, then stopped, as though he was afraid to enter the sacred precinct. I watched him timidly from the shadow of the altar stone. He smiled at me. He had a tan, bunny face, but he looked wayworn and dust-stained from travel. His tawny hair was cut short, unlike the long tangled manes and braids of our men from Carriggwin. And I saw the green gilt of his eyes, the way the sunbeams caught in his hair with a sheen of colored honey. I was too shy to speak. We exchanged words with our eyes. Then he loosened the leather pouch from his girdle, and one by one drew out 5 pieces of gold. He held them out to me, while I made no move to take them, and he tossed them at my feet. They scattered around me in the grass, glinting like puddles of buttercups. May the goddess walk with you, I said politely. I am not a moon maiden, but I will make the offering for you, as it is forbidden for men to enter her sanctuary. I picked up the gold pieces carefully, as though they were talisman. I had never seen anything like them before. They were a thick yellow gold, inscribed on both sides, one side with the profile of a man, though whether god or king I could not tell. The reverse was a chariot surrounded by strange inscriptions, perhaps magic symbols, such as those I've seen in grandfather's star charts. They felt warm as the palm of my hand, as though they might melt. I'll put them on the altar, I said. But they're for you, he said. Take them. He had a shining smile. He shifted the bundle he was carrying from one shoulder to the other. You dance as well as any wood nymph. Are you a spirit of the fields or the forest? I blushed to think that he had watched me dance. No man before had ever looked at me nor smiled in such a way. Who are you? He asked, but I did not answer. I quickly turned and walked toward the altar stone. When I looked back, he was striding away. As he reached the edge of the clearing, where the trail leads up to the hill fort, he turned and looked back. The sun was on his hair, a halo of light like a diadem. I thought of the image on the golden talisman. I wanted to call out to him, but he had stepped into the shadows of the woods and was hidden from my view. I put the talisman into my amulet bag, not knowing then that their secret held my destiny. So that's the beginning of the story, and how it progresses that she eventually, during a raid on the village by an opposing tribe, gets witnesses the chief, the head of the village, witnesses his older son killing his younger brother. So what he does is he kidnaps her because she's a witness to this. And because she's a Druid child, she can't be harmed. So he ends up taking her across the channel into the Belgian lands, which is now France. And eventually they end up at the border of Macedonia, where eventually she gets rescued by a young man who is Alexander when he was a youth. And then from there, the story progresses. How he turns her over to a Greek physician, Theon, who teaches her the healing arts. And then the story goes on from there until eventually Theon helps her get her way back home. So that's basically the story of dragons. And I hope you will enjoy it if you read it. And yeah, it was an interesting story to write because it was quite different from the other historicals that I usually write. So any questions, I will be happy to answer you.
Thank you so much for that great reading, Ruth, and for telling us a bit more about your book. Love to just give you a round of applause. Thank you for that. Um, so we have a question from Robert, and he asks, Ruth, what attracts you to fantasy rather than so-called realistic writing?
Well, it's historical fiction, Like,
Okay.
it's not really fantasy because I'm writing the way that she would have lived back then. So, I'm not making it up. Everything I say about the way their life was, that's the way it was. So it's interesting. I spend as much time doing research as I do on writing the books, and I don't write a book in a year. It takes me a long time to write and a long time to research stuff because I like to get stuff as correct as I can with it. And I've been fortunate enough to visit most of the sites that I write about. So I know I get the idea of what it would have been like.
I really admire your dedication to the process and spending a lot of time figuring out, what it's like to actually be your character and doing all that research.
It's a lot of work to be, especially a historical fiction writer, because you want to try to get things as correct as you can. I mean, some of it's fiction, of course, right? The way the characters are, but you want to have the settings and things like that correct. Yeah.
I have one question. I was wondering if your protagonist, Olwen, is she modeled after you? Do you share anything in common, or are you two completely different people?
Like I say, I heard her voice when I went to Old Sarum. I heard her voice as clear as day, and that's why I thought I had to write it down. And I was on my way to Greece. That was 79, and I was writing down everything I could remember and everything I could think about it in this book that I had because it was so strange that she was telling me these things about the story. And then later I thought, is this a past life regression? I mean that's kind of crazy, but I've been to all the places that she was talking about. You know, I've been to Old Sarum a couple of times. It's quite a magical place, and Stonehenge and that and because I made her from a Welsh tribe because my father is Welsh, and there was a Welsh tribe there at that time too. That tribe of her people, when eventually hundreds of years later the Romans came, that was the only tribe the Romans could not conquer. So they were a very strong people.
Thanks for sharing a bit more, yeah, about where you got the inspiration for your character from and about all the traveling you did to tell this story.
Well, like when it comes to my other books, Alexander, I got entranced with Alexander when I was eight, no, 16 years old, and wrote my first novel about him when I was 17. So he has always been my hero and I'm just fascinated by him. Before I started writing when I was 12, and I used to write stories about the First Nations people because I was fascinated with the First Nations people. And then I got interested in the Romans. But once I heard about Alexander when I was 16 years old, that completely fascinated me. I never dreamed at the time that I would end up going and living in Greece, but I did, and I would be there now if it was possible. But after 2000, I thought maybe I can't do those long trips because what my trip is not just to go lay on the beach. I go exploring archaeological sites every time I go. The one that I'm writing right now, the novel I'm writing right now, is about Alexander's mother, starting with her little known childhood. And I've been to all the places that where she lived and everything like that. So I have a pretty clear background idea of things.
Well, thanks for sharing a bit more about your upcoming project, giving us a taste of what's to come. Um, I guess, we're good for questions. I don't see any more in the chat or anything like that. So I guess I'll just wrap this up again by saying thank you to Ruth for reading and creating this book and putting all this time and energy into sharing your story and everyone for being here tonight. It's great to see such a nice crowd of friends and supporters from all over the world, and it is a joy for me to be able to host this event.
I was sorry. I was supposed to get my books last week, but they haven't come yet due to all the postal stuff. But I hope you get. Oh, is Pat McFarland here? Can you see if Pat McFarland is here? He's a marvelous artist. He lives.
It's an amazing achievement. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I'll just wrap up our launch for Dragons in the Sky with Silverbow Publishing. Thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you go out and purchase this wonderful novel, and be sure to stay tuned for upcoming Silverbow Publishing launches in the new year. And just have a great evening.
And again, thank you to Silverbow Publishing and Candace for taking my story on. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Megan, for hosting here. And I will be having a in-person book launch in the new year where I'll have some books on hand that you can buy if you haven't already got them. So we'll let you know then when it's going to happen.